don't want people to have to feel what I felt. Like I felt so bad for so long and nobody knew. The feeling of like not being seen, that is huge. That kills a part of your soul.
Hey, my name is Lidet. I was adopted from Ethiopia in 2007. I was about 5, turning 6 years old, and I was adopted from Wide Horizons. That was the name of the orphanage, and I was adopted with my younger biological sister to the very white state of New Hampshire. And my adopted family would go on to adopt quite a few other children from Ethiopia, whom I now consider siblings too.
My name's Hakima. I was adopted in 2002. I was 4 years old, and this was through Alpha House Orphanage or Foster Home, Americans for African Adoptions. And that was the second orphanage I was at. The first one was just a government orphanage. So I was adopted with my brother, my not biological brother. And then a few years after that, my brother also was adopted, my biological brother. I was adopted to New York City, and I didn't go back to Ethiopia until 2023. And yeah, that was my first time back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sahai. I was adopted when I was turning between 6 to 7. I was also coming from the Alpha House. I too was in government orphanages before I actually got to the Alpha House and then moved to Chicago. I was adopted with my younger sister. And then when my parents later found out that we did have family, and there were two older siblings that we had from our biological mother and father. They went and adopted them as well. And then we were able to actually go back a couple of times when we were younger. I actually went back by myself as well. Yeah, as an adult, I was able to get to know some of my family members and definitely get to know my father before he passed away. So that was a blessing.
Hi, I'm Kassaye. I was adopted in 1987. I arrived in Canada in the dead of winter. I don't really know too much about my background, but I arrived when I was about a year old. You know, there was war and famine in the region where I was from, and so that's sort of why I was adopted, and it was a private adoption as well.
You guys know the meaning of your name? You want to
Ooh,
start there?
love it.
I feel like
Yeah.
mine's very generic. I've always hated it. Then I grew to like it like a couple years ago. But mine's Lidet, so it's like celebration or birthday.
I love
Oh,
it.
like Lidet ha? Is that a word? Did I make that up or?
I know it's like
Lidet?
melting Lidet, right?
Yeah.
Lidet.
Yeah, right.
I think you're right. Cause honest, Sahai, I feel like I don't really know. Like I didn't really go into it that much. I bet there's so many like you know versions of it and different ways you say it. But that's I just know that's the little basic.
For me, I was fortunate enough actually to ask my father before he passed why he even named me Sahai. And apparently we were named by the seasons. It was what was happening. So I was born, I guess, in the summer. Sahai's like an ancient name too. It's like a name that, our grandmothers and great grandmothers have, or great aunties. But it made me think like names were given because of what was happening at that time, and not just like we decided or voted like they had a list.
Oh,
Pretty.
that is really pretty. Yeah.
Hakima means wise. Yeah, all I really know is that it's a Muslim name. Hakim means doctor in Amharic as well. But yeah, I've only seen one other Hakima on TikTok, but I've never met another Ethiopian Hakima. I've never met anyone else actually named Hakima. Only Hakims.
I feel like I've heard a variation. Hakeem.
Oh.
Yeah. Boys they're called Hakim. But in Ethiopia they say like Hikama.
Is the like the A sound like a female?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basically like female Hakim.
So Kasa means offering or compensation. The I is like my, so it's kind of like my offering or my compensation, like something that I'm giving to the world. That's what I was told that it means. It's not really a like woman's name. It can be unisex, but like Amharic, the Kasai it's more like a sound, I anglicize it. Kasich is like the feminine, but in Tigrinya, it's like a man's name. I don't know, was I meant to be a man? I don't know, because with Tigrinya speakers, like the messages that I get, like people would message me and they would think that I was a guy. If I'm with Eritreans, they're kind of like, huh? Like people are like, to the point where the Eritreans, because I do consider myself part Eritrean, they renamed me. So in the Eritrean community, they call me Saba. And I think they did it to be nice because they're like, we don't want her to get too many questions. So yeah, my name is very much a mystery, but I do like it. A lot of question marks. But
Wow.
And then you changed your name too, right? And what was that like going
oh
from?
yeah. Listen, my parents had to name me Annette, which is like fucking god awful name. It's like an old French name that like everybody's great aunt in Quebec. People are always, oh, my favorite aunt is Annette, and she was always like an 80-year-old woman, and I'm like, but that name. I hate my name. So my whole life it was like, like nobody called me Annette because I was like, don't call me that name. And when I would hear people saying that name, it felt like we're calling somebody else. Like I hated that name. Eventually I transitioned into like Annette Kassaye, and then finally I was like it was
When you came, did they have an Ethiopian name though, or not? Like, was there before they changed it to Annette, or was Annette the name?
no, it was Kassaye.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
yeah, they kept it as my middle name. When I found out that I was pregnant, I was like, this is the time for me to change my name. So my son can also have my Ethiopian name. So the idea was when he was born, my name would be already changed, and so he could have my Ethiopian name, but it didn't work out that way. I mean, I have my name changed, but he doesn't. When I changed it like officially in 2018. I was so shocked at how well they adapted to my name. Like, I was shocked. I was like, wow, like, I guess this is really my name. Nobody's struggling with it. I was like, I'm not going to yell at you.
It's also like a respect thing. I think sometimes if people overly like play it off, I think a lot of adoptees do. It's like, my name's Lidet, but you can call me L. You know what I mean? Obviously, it wasn't also till I was older I started having friends that were like, "Stop doing that! Like make people learn your name." So I feel like it also becomes like a respect thing. It's like, yeah, you can mess up here and there, but as the older you get, it's like you can either respect me and learn it and do it, or don't. You know what I mean? So I think maybe it's a good sign that you have friends that are like, it's not a little thing, especially for adoptees. Like names is not a small thing, especially when so many of us have been like, maybe not me necessarily, Ethiopian adoptees who've just been stripped of their names, and it's just another part of like the erasure of our culture, of our identity, that's so important. So I think even like your friends taking the time to be like, I hope it was intentional, it wasn't like this accidental thing, like learn how to say my fucking name, like excuse me, I have nothing, we have such few things that we can really say that's ours and we know it's ours.
And by the way, because people are like, oh, you got married. And I'm like, no, I did not get married. That is my original name. Because I have a hyphenated name, because I did keep my adoptive Canadian name. That is purely for history, like just for the archives. That's why I kept, and also because it's part of my experience. But yeah, but like when people are like, "Oh, do you want to have only one name?" and I'm like, "No, two. I know it's long, but I had that name added because I wanted both."
Wow.
Yeah, because my parents didn't want people to, they didn't want me to feel more different, to try to like protect me, but it was like, well, I'm still black and I'm still the only black person that everybody knows. So the only black person in like, 1,000-mile radius. So it's like I'm still different, like, but
Wait, can we actually, what are the other ways in which a lot, you think, whether it was your adoptive parents or it was you, like that you tried to assimilate into whatever culture you were forced into? Like obviously the name thing, some people changed it, said, call me B, call me L, call me Betty, call me whatever. Sometimes their names are forcibly changed, but I guess what are some other ways?
When people would see my white parents like coming to pick me up, or like just not being able to relate to other people's families at home, trying to assimilate and basically like pretend, that I hadn't been through what I've been through, or certain things weren't going on, or like when my brother also came to the United States and just going to school and pretending like everything was regular when like huge things were going on that no one else could really relate to, because everyone else that was like the kid of an immigrant or an immigrant was like obviously they immigrated here with their parents and their siblings. So it's just that type of trying to blend in. And
Definitely.
I would lie, like when I was younger, middle school times, like I would literally was undercover, like like people didn't know that stuff. So my close friends did, but there were still little moments where I would legit just like be pretending I didn't have white parents.
For sure. I know for me, it was very similar. I went to school with other Black kids, but yeah, they could tell that I was also, saying things differently. They would always say, "Why do you talk like that?" I'm like what? And you pronounce every letter. And I'm like, well, I'm learning the language. Like, I remember having this like, back and forth, but it was funny because when I got to high school and I understood language and like there was English and then there was slang English. And I was learning that from my, African friends. And it was really interesting, like when we would talk and then I'd be in class talking to my teacher, the language was shifting. Yeah, I think I tried to definitely run away from the typical assumption about adoption that, you were abandoned and you came from poverty and the whole African commercial that you would see on TV, after Sister Sister in between breaks. That's So Raven. It's just like, it would go to an African child clip. And so I used to hate that image of what people thought Ethiopians were because it was just this, poverty stricken, neglected country. Always that one child in the corner somewhere, nobody around them, and just like snot coming down their nose. And so I used to feel really shamed about that, even though it wasn't, it wasn't a personal attack. It was like more of a systematic attack against our people. But in high school, it's just like, oh, you came from Africa, so what is it like there? Well, if you saw the commercial, I guess we're working with it. And then our comprehension as kids, so it was, my parents were also like putting us into these like very bougie neighborhoods. And so the cultural sensitivity was like out the door. And so with the kids, it was very raw and real. It was what it was, it made me stronger. So in many ways, but I do remember feeling that shame.
Honestly, guys, I'm not gonna lie, I was like the epitome of like what I now would tell adoptees, please do not be like that, especially because I didn't necessarily believe what I was saying. But I was just like, I definitely reinforced, like, yeah, I'm grateful. I could have been a starving kid in Africa. What? Like, and it's like, sure, there's like loss and stuff like that on, in my personal story and stuff like that. But it's like, in a lot of ways, I don't think my story would even necessarily, it isn't what a lot of people thought it was. And I kind of let them go with it. I was like, yeah. And I kind of reinforced the whole, like, I'm grateful. And I was so pissed, but I was like, it's so much easier just to let them have it than to get in the ring with a bunch of people that don't even understand adoption. My experience in itself was just so alienating because what I was being told, what I was experiencing was just whatever. I'm like, I don't have time to try to teach you because I don't even know what the fuck's going on. You know what I mean? So I think that was it. But I did the whole, relaxer thing. I was very smart in the sense that I realized that being friends with the smart, non-problematic white kids was the best way to fly under the radar. So I stayed the hell away from all the Black kids, and I felt so bad. I didn't treat them like bad or anything like that, but it was horrible because it was definitely like internalized racism. I didn't even realize it for the longest time, but I was like, I can't risk, I cannot risk like being put with you guys, regardless of whether you're a quote unquote good kid or bad kid, to the point that like even some of like the Black kids that I went to school with, a few of them, and most of them were mixed. Like I said, of the very few, they were in my school, but we have like a unspoken, what's what I'm looking for, competition to see like not who could be more white, but it was so dumb. It was me and this other kid. I don't know where it was coming from, but it's just to say that like I committed to like being I'm like, if I'm gonna be, the whitest Black girl, then I'm gonna be the whitest Black girl, But I think it was also very much coming from a place of survival and how do you best get through this experience. I'm laughing about it now because I'm like, I'm so far from that now. We all had to do things in our early childhood, in a way that was like, how do you best survive this circumstance, And again, growing up very white New Hampshire, very basic white girls, very sometimes well-intentioned but not very well-informed individuals and people, and you're just tolerating that from, you know, coaches that think you're only. I wasn't even a good runner. I remember that was a whole thing. It was like they couldn't figure out. It was like, this is like, girl, this is your thing. Like why are you where are your East African genes? And I was like, I don't know, man. So I'm like, girl, I'm also failing at that. So it's funny now, but at the time I was like, what the hell is going on? So it really was just like a crazy time. But I definitely tried to assimilate as much as I could. But it was interesting at some point when I realized, dang, no matter how white I am, I'll never be white. I'm told I'm white, you know. Anyway, that was a long ramble. I always think it's interesting to ask people because we all try to assimilate in our own way.
Like there was like no people of color, no Black people where I grew up. So for me it was like I grew up in rural Quebec. Everybody was white because it's very French speaking, but there are like pockets of English speaking minorities, and my family's religious, so it was very rural, religious. So like, you know, everybody kind of knew each other. I went to like a religious school. Yeah, it was like Black is like, what? What is that? You know, it was just like there was not even any mention because it's like nobody was there. So it was like Black
Crazy.
identity, like that was just absent from like my life. But then I had my hair. That was the reminder. Like I'm like, I don't know nobody knows what to do with this hair. But then I had, luckily though, the school that I went to, there was a Haitian woman that was like literally, I don't know if she tapped me on the shoulder, but I like to tell it that way. She was like, I'm gonna do your hair for you. She didn't ask. She was like, I'm gonna do your hair for you. Tell your parents I'm gonna do your hair.
Oh,
That's
And
adorable.
she is like one of the many angels in my life. I think I was like 7. So like she did my hair. Like at recess, I would go to her classroom and she would like do my hair. So she would go to like New York a lot. So all her like hair stuff was from the States. And so, you know, I was privy to the whole, what is it called? Blue magic gel. Like you know,
yes.
that was slathered in my hair. In
That's
the
hilarious.
90s, late 90s. She was like the contact that I had with like anything Black. So it was like when I went to her house, more when I was like 10 years old or whatever. And then her cousins, her family from Montreal or like from the States were there. So that was like my like small contact with like Black people really. I mean, there was like Black people that I would see like at the store here and there, and my mom would be like, "Hey, look, there's a Black person." I'd be like, you know, like what? Like what? You know, it was like a big deal, like going to the grocery store to see that one African immigrant who was on exchange studying at the university. Like that was my childhood. It was literally like my neck was like,
A Black
who's
person?
that? So yeah, that was, and then in my adult teen years, I went to summer camp. So then I met some, you know, Black girls and stuff. But it was really far and few between. The identity part was interesting. It definitely hit me when I was older, when I was actually around more Black people. That's when like the whole identity stuff, it hit me in my, you know, late teens, closer to 20. Everything sort of like went kind of
Mm.
haywire-ish at that
Mm.
age. But my whole like when I was a kid and you know, it was kind of like, okay, I don't know what that is. Like,
And when I started hanging out with African American kids, and it was interesting because their families also noticed,
Mm.
you know, the separation, and they took it upon themselves. And granted, I was in the city of Chicago, so you know, Chicago, it's like
Mm.
a mega, you know, city. We have Black people like who are making millions, who Ebony and Jet, Oprah, like we have those pronunciations, and so, but still being sheltered because we were going to all white
Mm.
settings all the time on the weekends in between classes. So, but I do remember the disruption it caused because they were reteaching me, and they said, "Of course you want to be here, baby girl. We look like you." They would say a bunch of things that I'm always like, you know, I remember them saying to reinforce like why I felt the way I felt or why I was so drawn to them. It was like, or what did they say, a moth to a flame. I couldn't speak, but I wanted to be around more and more Black people because I was trying to have honest conversation. And to be honest, they were the most honest folks around me, at least at that time.
I think there's something needs to be said about, and granted, I've had my own complicated relationship with Black people in general. So I'm not saying, they're all this or all that. However, I've found that, African Americans and even Africans in general that I met in undergrad, they were the ones like, if I said, I was adopted, they were the ones that didn't automatically assume that it was great, and especially when they
Yeah.
viewed that they were white people, they were the first one that were like, how does that work? I was the one
Yes.
that made it rosy. I didn't feel like I was compelled to. And I think there's something that also needs to be said about the fact that a lot of adoptees adopted by white people, especially those that are liberal and that say that they're liberal, yet they have not a single Black friend. And I think those are because they know that they would challenge them so fucking quick about not necessarily even like the way about taking care of us. I think people understand that it's a privilege to take care of Black children as white people, because you're saying you have to, you can meet this standard that Black people can provide. But it's something else to, I think, purposely kind of separate yourself, because I think like all of us, sure, may have all been in white areas, but there were Black people maybe not too far away, right? If you really wanted to make that effort. But I think there's that sort of insecurity on their end. I guess they were willing to let us suffer to some extent to make sure that their sense of parenthood was kind of nurtured, or they felt good about something. Does that make sense? Because I'm like, there's no way if I was surrounded by African Americans or just Africans in general more, they would have caught so much bullshit so quickly, so fucking quickly. And they would have been so funny about it. It might have been straight. I don't know. But I know for a fact it would have definitely saved me, but it wouldn't have made my adopted parents necessarily look good. But I found that they were the ones that were just they didn't automatically assume that it was good, and if they found out that it wasn't good, they weren't surprised. So
Cass, you said like she was your angel. Yeah, there were just people throughout my childhood that were kind of just like, oh, come here, like, let me help you. Not in a bad way. And Ethiopians as well. And like, I know you had a TikTok about this, Lidet, like feeling kind of not accepted by Ethiopians, but then looking back and realizing that they were just concerned for us.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because now I'm just like, oh, you just saw like, this little Ethiopian child doesn't speak Amharic and is like with these white people. So that was like a natural reaction for them to have. But definitely in, like you guys said, in college is when I swear like the wires connected, like even though I had been around Black people and like wasn't in a all white space, it was still so many things being just taught to me repeatedly. Yeah, all that stuff about Ethiopia just being like this horrible, impoverished, terrible place, basically. Especially the further back you go, the early 2000s, like there was zero respect for Africans in general, as we all know. That like was definitely internalized for me of just like literally fearing my own country.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, without even knowing it, but it was just like when I thought like, how could I possibly go back to Ethiopia one day when basically everyone is repeatedly telling me like it's this horrible place. Yeah, even when you tell people I'm Ethiopian or it comes up, there would be people that literally would like they would look sorry for you when you say where you're from. Like that, having that repeatedly told to you, even if it's not directly, is really crazy. College is when that started to be like, I started to just question everything, like adoption, everything I had witnessed within like the adoption agency and like everything, just it all just started to click.
It's interesting though, like, both of you, Sahai and Hakima, are saying, mentioned just like, the stereotype of like Ethiopia and everything and how that kind of bothered you. It's funny because for me, I was like, well, that was me because I was born during the famine and during the war in the North. Like that's actually the reason why like I became like a manufactured orphan. That was my experience. So when I think of Ethiopia, like I did think war. That's why I'm here. Not that it was like part of my identity, but it was when I would meet people and like Ethiopians, not that I was like, I'm a child of war, everyone. No. I did like I never even like talked about Ethiopia at all. It was like people would be like, "Where are you from?" And I'd be like, "Huh?"
Yeah.
Like the fact that I was from Ethiopia, it happened and it was done. Like I was like very assimilated because that I had no choice, right? So when people looked at me different, I was kind of like confused because I'm like, "Oh yeah, like that's how that's how far I was from Ethiopia." But then when I would think about Ethiopia, like once a year because I on my birthday or something because I hate my fake birthday, then I would think about that. But when I did start meeting Ethiopians and I would talk about that, it would make them really uncomfortable. And I'd be like, huh,
Mhm.
but that's my experience. Like I am in this
Mhm.
damn country because of that. So
Mhm.
it's just interesting how like for both of you and for a lot of people, like that's not their connection to the country. But for me it was. But I didn't see it as like a negative thing. It was just like that happened, with my parents. They never tried to like make that like, oh, Ethiopia's a bad place. Like they never emphasize that, which I am happy about.
It's really unfortunate how adoption and the whole like white saviorism and just the way adoption blew out of proportion and became like, such a fraudulent thing. It's just crazy how that like takes away from the actual situations going on in Ethiopia because that is a real thing. Like people are displaced because of famine, war, but it's like I feel like everything has been so just twisted.
Yeah, I think it's true though. Our country was in a crisis state. And when you think about like what's happening to other countries in this time, you can kind of understand how families are separated and divided, and it makes sense. I never really thought about Ethiopia being like under attack.
Mhm.
I know it might have been internal, but it was still the country was under attack. Our culture, our people, and the land was under attack. And so we were all, byproducts of it one way or another. But also some of our parents or family members were enticed because of the opportunity it brought and the demand of the adoption, and your kid can go to the pristine part of this planet and live a more luxurious life. It was like winning a lottery ticket.
Oh, yeah. I think what's super funny about like what you're saying in terms of, this idea of, adoptees having this significantly better life. As we all know now, if not we've lived it, that is so fucking far from the truth. And even if some of us do have it, there's a lot of strings, there's a lot of things that people don't consider. The role that celebrities played that totally added to the hype, but it also made us seem like the next iPhone. You know what I mean? People were genuinely shopping for children like they shop on Amazon. And to this day, that makes me want to throw up. At the same time, it almost makes me feel better when I realize a lot of the issues that I see now, because you can totally see how that can be manufactured purely with the way they sold children. Because what do you mean you have to go on a website and get to customize a child? You don't get to do that when you have a baby. Like you don't. Or if you're the other ways that, if you're fostering and all this, it's like, do you want a kid between this age and that age? Do you want them to have a disability? Like that is a literal thing that you can do. And it further kind of separates that like human aspect of what you're doing. That's a child with a family with whatever. I think that people that engage in that sort of behavior and not seeing that practice and not seeing as problematic is also really horrible. But then you have celebrities on top of that. And I know that what is her name? Angelina Jolie, she adopted kids from the same orphanage that I was adopted from, and like the picture of her and Brad Pitt, I think Brad Pitt's in the photo. I don't know, but I do know she was in there, and it was interesting because I think even the way I understood that, and I think sometimes I used it as a positive thing, but it always made me feel really gross. I think when I was mad, I was like, dang it, Angelina Jolie, why could you have waited and picked me up? There's always that aspect of it. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I was that close. Come on. No, but at the same time, it's just kind of like it's just seeing how we became like a trend. Getting kids from Ethiopia became a trend to the point that even I think I said this to Kassaye. I was watching some movie really randomly, it was some stupid rom-com, and in the movie it was like a popular one back in the early 2000s. I guess like the couple on there, one of the side characters was adopting a kid, and it was from Ethiopia. And I was just like, that's not a coincidence. And I was just like, holy shit, like it really was this movement, and with the corruption underneath it, all these other just really problematic things already happening foundationally, and then you just add layers and layers and layers and layers. And like I said, celebrities have so much pull, so much power, and when they're further reinforcing this, white superiority complex with getting kids from Ethiopia, it was like it really cemented this idea of adoption, especially being an Ethiopian adoptee, that adoptees couldn't even attack if they wanted to. I think we all tried and realized it just seemed so impenetrable. It was like, I gotta just find a way to cope with all that.
I mean, it's like the numbers show like after
Yeah.
Angelina hit adopted, the numbers like they went up. It was like
That's
yeah, it shows in the numbers.
so J-Lo, I think. Was that it?
I think that might be. It's like an early 2000s movie.
Oh,
It's a movie,
God.
yeah.
You guys
And
keep-
she goes to Ethiopia, goes to some village, looks like no village that's ever existed in Ethiopia.
Of course.
And then she goes inside and picks a baby, and there's like babies laying out, and she like chooses one. And this was before I was out of the fog or whatever, and I was still just like, what the heck is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the transactional continues. At least now I'm starting to see in my older age as I inspect this phenomenon of mine, is that transaction didn't just end when we were given away. It kept continuing, and it makes sense why a lot of us ended up being in these abusive spaces. And, I think the last incident that we discussed, an African American set of kids here in the US, and how much money the family had gotten from one state. I think it was like $300,000 just from one state. And they went to like 3 different states before they were finally convicted of, horrendous crimes. Seeing that article, it really clicked in my head that the transaction never ended. It kept continuing, and the disconnection of who we were as adoptees to other people, even to our families. It was almost like a benefit package for social accolade, a benefit package for financial assistance, a benefit package for being, a good person in this world, having done something, when the UN was prominent and trying to save Africa. And these were families who were, trying to follow that trend of saving a child. Going back to our names, it shows like this kind of disconnected, romanticized relationship with Africa and its people. And that's, and that we had this kind of like very surface level relationships with our parents once we wanted a deeper dive. It was like they were too uncomfortable for that. I think even the fact that they wanted to adopt, that discussion. I know some of the adoptees in our circles have wonderful parents, and they're able to have these conversations, but a lot of us aren't even able to have those deep dives with our parents. If our parents could, even in our older age, just say, hey, I was one of those completely oblivious white women. Yes, I was, like I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I should have done better, because society, it evolves, and we come from very horrific times as a people and even as a planet. But I think the accountability is where it just kind of falls off.
It's been really no accountability at all. That's like the biggest thing that makes me angry. No accountability. And for me, at least, it was like no one ever gave me a chance to grieve anything. Yeah, it's like continuously being just like having your truth repeatedly ignored to the point where it's normalized.
That's a
Yeah.
bar. Yeah.
That's like, and that goes into obviously the whole like identity crisis, and it's just like the biggest gaslight ever. I'm like 26 now, and it took me so many years to be like, wait, none of this is normal. The more I learn about my specific, like the orphanage and like what happened to other people, is what makes me like even more upset about the lack of accountability. Maybe I turned out okay, I'm here, I'm fine, but it's like so many other people did not. Yeah, I think we have a right to just like ask for that accountability.
No, I agree.
For me, I feel like I learned at a very young age, or I was knew like there's not going to be any. Because, which, you know what, I hope I'm wrong, and I feel like I think as awful as things are in the world, I feel like people are becoming more aware about certain things, and I'm happy about that. But I think for me, it was like I was always like very alone in my experience. When you're a child, you just for me anyways, it was like, well, this is what happened. Like this is just my life. Keep, not even like keep going, but you just kind of like blank it out because there's just like there's nobody I can talk to. There's like I need to learn more about disassociation because now I'm like, oh, maybe that's why I was so spacey as a kid. Like I was probably like I was so dissociated like for myself and my experience on a very deep level. And I think, it's as I got older and I was out in the world and like I moved away, started my own life, that's when things really like hit the fan. It was just me. Like there's like my family they can't help me.
Mm.
Like I'm almost 40 and it's like nothing has changed. I think I have like, my sisters are a bit more aware of adoption, and I have like one sister who's like more aware of like race and but like there's no use to even talking or convincing, it's like no, this is like my life now. It is parents' responsibility to make sure their children are well taken care of, is safe, and because this, especially for Black children, it's huge, these conversations, and I don't say that to say that people shouldn't talk to their parents about it. I think that it is good to, but I just know for me and the time that I grew up, because I grew up in like the 90s, and it's kind of like, and I kind of created my own life, and then that's it. I came back to like, the adoptee community because like I don't want people to have to feel what I felt. Like I felt so bad for so long and nobody knew. And that's it's like it's a terrible place. I want to be present for other adoptees because I know how it feels. And I didn't go through like what a lot of people went through. Like I wasn't abused. A lot of things were not good, but the feeling of like not being seen, and that is huge. And that kills you. That kills a part of yourself. That kills a part of your soul. Yeah, nobody like, we weren't brought here to suffer. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like, yes, like these people need to be confronted. Yes, like this is not fair. Not fair to children. It's not respectful towards children. But that's a whole other topic that I feel passionate about. How
Mm.
children are oppressed by parents and adults.
Yeah.
So I just feel like adoption, you really see that. The
Yeah.
violence of adults with transracial adoption, like it's like you see everything.
Yeah.
You see like colonial, like all the isms, like you see it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. One of the many reasons why, like, I'm happy that all of us are getting together to like have these discussions, because I think that a lot of people have felt really like they're carrying a big load and it's not theirs. Like, felt really bad about ourselves, but it's not our fault. Like we were just brought into this and then given like all these fucking bricks to carry on our backs.
Right. Yeah. And I think that I remember one time we were talking and we said
Mhm.
therapy is a luxury. And it was the first time I realized how healing was a luxury for our community, Wherever we are in the world, America, you know, most African people are getting the shorter end of the stick. And especially mental health, is not something that's like widely talked about. And ironically, being in an all white family, it's not also in every white family's agenda to go to therapy either. Um,
Mm.
even the ones who could afford it. I actually grew up with, like highly educated parents, and yeah, therapy was only for kids apparently, in their head. And I wish we had more like family therapy, and they went to therapy separately, but it was the idea that we had something to fix, but they didn't. As parents, like there was no room for learning.
Yeah, like in the 90s, it was like nobody talked about that. It was like therapist, what? Depression, what?
I do. Obviously, everybody has a right to have children. If they don't have children, whatever. But I do truly believe that adoption should be reserved for um, in some regard privileged individuals, and that sounds really messed up, but I mean it's people that have resources, it's people that have time to learn and they're willing to learn. Because I'm so fucking sorry, if nothing else, you look at Ethiopian adoptees and you can see exactly why that's the case. Having resources and stuff, that's not enough, but I think there is just certain levels of just need that needs to be met, and like, awareness to racial issues, or where social positioning, psychology, like, where is your mental health at? Adoptees, they're just seen as these individuals that are just taking so much from adoptive parents, and the adoptive parents are losing so much in the process adopting children, and as a result it's like, you should be grateful for whatever you get because you don't deserve anything, because I saved you. And I think that's just such a fucked up mentality, but then again it totally makes sense in terms of what we're seeing. And you'll see and you'll hear adoptees talk about how their adopted parents said that they own them, like literally will say that to them, that they own them because they bought them and they understand that. And there are adoptive parents who are very, very aware of the fact that they control the resources that they know that they need, not even because necessarily of adoption alone. I think that's a whole other thing. Adoptees aren't necessarily even complaining about the natural trauma that comes with being displaced from your home, right? We can't even get into that shit. We're at the part about names. Were you even able to keep your own name? Do you know your birthday? Was that, if people knew it, were they withholding from you? With your adoptive parents withholding it from you? That's what we're working on. We can't even get to the fact that adoption inherently is a traumatic thing. We're so busy having to find ways to find solutions for all these perfectly preventable traumas that adoptive parents have put on, that the adoption system has put on, so adoptees get so beyond screwed over, like, so like I don't, and it's the point that it makes me sweat because I feel so like, what the fuck can I do, to help? Not everybody should be allowed to adopt, and they're not capable of supporting an adoptee the way that they need at all. I don't know.
I think there's a huge level of audacity, because I think about this all the time. I really just try to replay everything, and I'm just like, you guys took Ethiopian children that came from living in an orphanage and just brought them on an airplane to a foreign country where nobody looks like them or speaks their language, and you then expected them to just bond with you and play happy, basically. And
And say
I
I love you.
especially and say I love you. And especially for those that were older than, like, not a toddler. I have memories of that, like, transition period, but I don't have any memories of Ethiopia. But like watching my siblings go through it and meeting other adoptees, I'm just like, it is a level of one audacity and also delusion to just expect this from a child and to just ignore the huge cultural differences. We all know it's just trauma. It's extreme trauma. The more I replay that and just try to picture it, it's the most traumatizing thing you could do to somebody. Like, you're literally taking a child from everything they know yet again, and then like just basically asking them to play pretend. So yeah, I really struggle with just like the whole idea of adoption in general, obviously. Is there a way to make it ethical completely, especially international adoption? Yeah.
Yeah, I think international, at least we voted, we voted when the last Zoom we had, I think the consensus was like, we think international should be banned because it's
Okay.
the cultural displacement is like way too much. But even like seeing adoption here in America, where I've seen like cousins adopting, their nephew or their niece just because things happen, or, child comes to the parent and the parents aren't equipped. They find the next of kin. They go and find the person. They make sure they're able to take care of. They do like an inspection process. And so I could see that, happening in Ethiopia. But I think to send children outside of Africa, yeah, I think there is some like, genetic like displacement that happened to every child, that trauma that we could, like we think about passing on to the next generation. I think about that all the time, and part of my healing is so that I don't, if I do continue this lineage, that I'm not passing on trauma, that I've at least done the work. And to be clueless, like we are, about our family's trauma, and we're figuring it out, It's like I go to the doctors all the time and they say, do you know anything about your mom and dad? And I always say, I'm adopted. I have no idea what kind of medical history I have. I am the first one. So whatever, we discover with me.
Yeah.
And knock on wood, I'm healthy, but I'm just saying, like this idea, like we have no idea where we come from. And that rhetoric that we keep even saying to ourselves, but sometimes we're just answering medical questions, just the trauma of reliving this abandonment, and understanding it deeply, it almost like opens that wound even more. But yeah, I think international adoption, like black on white, like our planet is not ready for that. I commend people who are in interracial relationships. Like I think, they should be the spear of evolution, but not the child with, an adult from another race. And I say this with love, to my own parents, but I think that it was their pride and ego and their white privilege that prevented them from bonding with us.
Mm.
It wasn't because money was an issue, resources were an issue, even our forgiving heart wasn't an issue. We're still beyond the atrocities we experience. We're still like willing to reach out, but the shame they feel of inspecting themselves in this experience is what prevents us from healing with them, but also it kind of prevents us from, like understanding our own childhood. And I think as adoptees, like for me, I live in another state, so I can do it on my own in peace. But I know that, some of us are still very much connected to our like core homes, and parts of our own identity are not even permissible in our minds. We're taught you can't think like that, or you shouldn't think that because I'm here. I'm your mother now. I'm giving you a better life. Is this the cost of staying connected to our adoptee parents, who don't want to heal with us?
To me, it really comes down to politics and like women's bodies, women's rights. To me, that's what it comes down to. So it's people focus on the children a lot, but it's like if people actually have what they need, then this wouldn't be issues. We can stay debating whether it's good or bad. And I'm like, I'm really bored of that conversation and I won't answer it. It's like, what do people need? It's a public policy issue. It's a public policy issue. I'm not the first that said that. The person that said that was like the Korean adoptees. And so to me, it always comes down to that. It's like Ethiopia. There's been periods of maybe stability, but it's like the country, there's a lot of issues. When people have what they need, then this is not going to be happen. And this is not going to be happening. And it's like you see that the history of international adoption and just how like the placement or the movement of children, it really has to do with what's happening politically in the country. People want to depoliticize children and families when it is what happens to families is extremely political. Even in Canada or the States, it's very political. Oh, it's such a beautiful thing. It's not even about beauty or not. It's not about that. Africa, we've always had ways to take care of our own. Like indigenous systems, we've always had that. Indigenous cultures, we've always had ways to take care of our own. Always. Like when I was in West Africa, like my boyfriend at the time, like his mom, like she was always taking care of children. There was always like children living at her house, and she wasn't the only one. Like they had systems to take care of people's children. Ethiopia, like, I won't get into geopolitics and all that, but it's very deeply connected, like with the amount of NGOs in Ethiopia and like but I mean, and I'm saying this because it's in the research, it's in the literature, the undermining of these indigenous systems by like different like charities and orphanages. Like that's not my opinion. This is actually like people have written about that. Let's just say that there is better ways to do things, and we have that within our culture. It's just like we haven't been able to because of a lot of stuff that's happening. It's complicated, and then people are always like, well, what do you do with the children? Well, that's the question, but the band-aid solution, it hasn't been working, because if you don't know, you'll know now that a lot of international adoptees are homeless. We have high rates of homelessness. We have high rates of institutionalization. We have high rates of this, high rates of that. And it's not the children. There's so many layers to it. But it at the end of the day, it's like it's not working. It's not working. And the reason why we're all here is like, we can talk about that. Like, what did all of us have to do to be able to sit here and have this conversation? And I'm not going to be telling people everything about my life, but I did a lot of things in order to, be sitting here with my head straight, looking at the camera right here.
Mm.
It didn't just happen. No.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's like that with all of us. You didn't just wake up and just be fine. No, I don't give anybody the people that I give credit to is the people that actually showed up for me when life, when things were really shit was really hard. These are angels in my life, or it's them.
Mm.
These are the people, and myself, and my willingness to believe in life. I'm not giving that to my adoptive parents. It wasn't about them at all. It was about me and other people that showed up. And I'm saying that because people like to throw that at you and be like, you're a successful adoptee. You went to school, you did this. And it's like, and I just smile, because it's like I don't owe them my story, and we don't owe people stories, but there's so much stuff that we don't say, and I only say this because I see our community, I see how much we suffer, I see how much I suffered. I don't like talking about it, but sometimes you have to make people to cry sometimes for people to believe you, and that is really why I want to start talking about these things, because I'm tired of people telling us we're well adjusted. No.
I'm sick.
It's a trigger word. Well adjusted.
Like, it's meant to be a compliment, but it's
Yeah.
like, for years, the same person telling me that I'm well adjusted. People don't want to know our stories. They'll be like,
because it makes them have to acknowledge the fact or the truth about adoption that they don't want to see. And I found that it makes people, even some of my closest friends to this day, they're good because they'll stomach it, but it makes them feel so uncomfortable. Like that the comments I've heard from friends, they're like, and I think I really mentioned this. One of my friends said to me recently, she goes, Lidet, you are the most fucked up normal person I've ever met. And I said, thank you.